I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
What's up, everyone? It is Richie here from the F1 podcast. Hope you all are having a wonderful Monday afternoon. I'm here with Andrew and Erica. How are y'all doing?
What's up? What's up? What's up?
Hello, everybody.
I hope you've survived the weather that is Toronto today. A lot of rain and a lot of places that are
You mean the
flooded.
absolute monsoon that we had to experience? Yes.
Like
So-
swimming on your way to work. We love that.
Do a barrel roll.
And we actually have a special guest today, Ash from the 107 podcast. For those that don't know, we were on their podcast, I think, previewing the Canadian Grand Prix. And now we get to welcome Ash onto ours. Ash, welcome to the F1 podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Look forward to it.
And how are things for you? And I guess you were calling in from New York City.
Yeah, I'm working in New York, so I'm kind of on your time zones for a little bit. And it's like a sauna here, so no rain, just pure
Welcome to our neck of
heat.
the woods.
I'm missing the cold of London, so never thought I'd say that, but here I am.
I think today we just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about yourself and like 107 podcast. So I just open it up to you is like, why'd you guys start a podcast?
So my co-host Jacob, who's actually on his way to the Hungarian Grand Prix, which is why he can't be here.
So jealous.
Which it's also like apparently they're experiencing a heat wave in Hungary too, and they're not equipped with like AC at all to help support that.
I'll make sure. I'll tell him to prepare for that. Yeah, we've been huge F1 fans for a while, and when I was at the gym, I was listening to a lot of F1 podcasts, and they were either like really technical or too like clickbait, rage-inducing, kind of like too much of the drama. So like me and Jake were quite creative people, so I just said to him like one day, so we should just do our own podcast because we do it every Monday and Tuesday. We just talk about the race, and he's like super smart and all like podcasting and social stuff. Over 100 episodes later, a few thousand followers on Instagram, we get to kind of meet and talk to cool people like yourselves around F1. So yeah, it's just purely born out of just trying to like be a little bit technical, a little bit fun, and a little bit more of a focus on F1 and then less of the outside stuff. That's quite hard to do.
Now, I think a big question that we all have on our mind is, being, yourself located in the UK, how excited were you after Lewis's win at Silverstone, getting kind of the overall feel and how that guy kind of galvanized, the F1 nation after that win, to be honest with you? And what are your thoughts now with the trajectories of both Ferrari and Mercedes? In your opinion, is he making the correct decision going to Ferrari next year, or what are your overall thoughts on that?
Great question. Just to kind of give you an idea, I live 2.5 kilometers away from the McLaren factory. So.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just crying over here. It's fine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people grew up with Lewis. He brought a lot of fans into the sport. He kind of really galvanized British motorsport. No offense to Jensen or anything, but like being a serial winner. So everyone's got a soft spot for Lewis. He's had a big fight to kind of get where he's got. He's not coming there through money. And then when you followed someone for so long who's been winning, you kind of feel as a nation that you're losing as well when he's not winning. And he gives it his all. So when he crossed the line, I don't think there was a single dry eye in the UK. I think everyone was crying. And there's a trend going around on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like mothers for Lewis Hamilton, because all the mums just seem to love Lewis Hamilton. So when he was like on his last few laps, there's loads of videos of all like the mums just screaming, "Come on, Lewis! Come on, Lewis!" I think everyone in the UK just has that connection to Lewis. So like when he loses, we feel like we've lost. But when he wins, and to win your home race, especially in a time where like Brad Pitt is filming an F1 movie, it's like you couldn't script it. You couldn't script it. Like if there was one race he was going to win after his long hiatus, Silverstone would have been the one, and it is the one. And yeah, he gave the Brits something to cheer about, considering we lost in football. You lose.
But do you think the Brits would cheer like Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari? Like I can't think of the last time an Englishman was in a Ferrari. Nigel Mansell back in the day.
Yeah, and funny enough, my dad is a huge Formula One fan and got me into sports. And the Italians loved him because he was just a pure racer, and they will absolutely support Lewis wherever he goes. If he went to Haas, if he went to Alpine, he's got his brand, he's got his following. They'll follow him. You talked about kind of like what does it mean for Lewis going to Ferrari? I just think it's just like when two brands, like it's like like Marvel Cinematic Universe. Everything's just coming together for this huge event.
Would that line though be drawn kind of if he went to Red Bull?
Nope.
Really?
No,
Well, yeah,
really?
that is really interesting.
Lewis is loved. He's a sir, right? He's loved here. And like I said, look at when he was losing, he never lost support. So it doesn't matter where he goes to, there'll always be the Team LH behind him.
I think that's one of the things I love about Formula One. I mean, like if we look at a lot of other major sports, like you have your team, and even if there's a player that you've absolutely loved that was loyal to the team for years, did great stuff, as soon as they go somewhere else, people will boo them the second they step on a home pitch or like court or anything. But everyone's a little bit more forgiving in F1. It's more about the actual driver and what they bring than any sort of team loyalty that you get elsewhere. So it's nice to know that he's not suddenly going to be shunned by the entire country when he moves to Ferrari next year.
No, I think they're probably looking forward to all the like events and stuff that he'll do driving around in Ferrari. But I think it's like you mentioned other sports there. The thing with, I think, like you see with Formula One is like a lot of it's down to the car. So they know Lewis is a winner and is a winning driver. And if he's not performing, it's the car, not him. So that's why they'll continue to support him.
What is your thoughts of like the season so far from like, I guess, a UK perspective? I know last year was a lot of Red Bull dominance with Max Verstappen. I mean, this season we already have 6 drivers who have won races already. I guess like from what you and Jacob have been noticing when you interact with your fans, particularly for this season.
British motorsport's in a really good space right now. You've got Lewis, you've got him for another 2 or 3 seasons at Ferrari. He's a proven winner. You've got Lando Norris and McLaren coming up strong. So who knows what the future seasons are going to hold for them if they can bring the fight to Red Bull. You've got Ollie Behrman coming in. You've got George Russell performing at Mercedes. The Brits have a lot to be thankful for in what's happening with Formula One. I think what we can see here is like continued success. Like once Lewis retires, there's George, there's Lando, there's Oliver Behrman, see how he performs. It's not like once Lewis is gone, it's like, like Messi in Argentina or Ronaldo in Portugal or maybe like, LeBron James or Steph Curry leaving their teams. Like we've got the next lot of British superstars coming up.
European versus North American kind of viewpoint. North America here for F1, a lot of us got into it, most recently, right, due to Drive to Survive and kind of that whole Netflix growth and boost there. But what particularly for you grew your love for F1? Like what first attracted you when you became a fan to F1, and then kind of what has then allowed you to, like, as you've grown or evolved as a fan, what do you appreciate the most about the sport?
So I got into it through my dad. He was a fan in the early days, and I was just that was our way of bonding, just watching it with him, and it's like cars going fast, multicolored, weird shapes. It's like that's pretty cool. I didn't really understand the sport too much because I didn't really follow a driver or anything like that. And then Fernando Alonso came on the scene, and I have a thing for like supporting underdogs. So there's a big Michael Schumacher dominance, and then Fernando Alonso came along, and I was like, okay, wow, this guy's bringing it to Michael, and I'm kind of rooted for him. And I think that's where like you build your emotional connection with this sport, whether it's a driver you saw on Drive to Survive, like Daniel Ricciardo, Pierre Gasly, or you were watching Lewis win Silverstone. You build that emotional connection, and you're kind of hooked for life. And when they win, you win. When they lose, like it really hurts. So as a Fernando fan, it's been hurting for a long time. But I think it's just, a lot of people kind of like, oh, you're Drive to Survive fans, you're this, you're that. But it showed a human part of the drivers, which we never got to see. Because if you think about a lot of sports, you see people's facial expressions, football, soccer, ice hockey to an extent. When a driver puts a helmet on, apart from the radio, you can't really tell how hard they're working, they're angry. So seeing that human side built that emotional connection with fans and drivers, and really, like you said, exploded the sport. Because like I can relate to Daniel Ricciardo, Pierre Gasly, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc.
You talk about like the emotions, because we can see that a lot when it comes to the press conferences, and like no secret, Lance Stroll doesn't have the greatest of poker faces when he's doing his press conferences here. Do you think that Fernando Alonso is going to end his career at Aston Martin? And Andrew, you can add in your take too.
That's a great question, because honestly, I don't think the car's going to be anywhere to challenge for wins and championships what he wants until 2026. There's strong rumors of Adrian Newey being linked, but he's going to need time. So I think he's a racer through and through, and like if you can continue to do it, he'll do it. I think he will end his career at Aston Martin. I think he'll actually try and go for the Indy 500 and do the Triple Crown. But I think as a racer, his skills there, he'll always race. but he said this in a lot of interviews. It's like as he's got older, the constant traveling, the time zones, that's what's really wearing him down. And I can tell you now, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, happy. I'll fly to like LA in 24 hours. After doing it, I'm like, this sucks and I hate it. So I totally understand where he's coming from with the constant travel. And I think that's what will turn him off in the sport. He's like, if I've got to do more of this, it's just not for me anymore. So,
and unfortunately, I think it's like he's unfortunately now on borrowed time, or not on borrowed time, but it's like time is coming up, right? Unfortunately for his retirement, right? Because especially with all the travel, it wears on you. It just affects him, like not from the racecraft perspective, but maybe sometimes maybe mentally, right? And kind of like pushing himself hard. And also, do you want to go out a couple years before that happens, right? So that you can say you went out at your semi best, as opposed to potentially crawling out. Where you see a lot of like North America, right? With like Tom Brady, right? Did he go out? Should he have gone out a year earlier based on the way he's performing, or did he go at the right time? Even though his performance took a dip. So I think he does finish his career at Aston Martin. I do think he will be compensated well enough to want to stay as well. And I think it would be kind of a fun way to leave the sport as if he was able to challenge for, say, a win at Aston Martin, because then it would create like a whole new legacy kind of for that team in that case too. I guess, Ash, because we live in a podcasting, right? It's a form of media, and we live in a world where media is constantly available. And, we're starting to see now that more of the European media in F1 has become more intense, a lot more different outlets coming on. So kind of what are your overall thoughts on the European media within the F1 world, and kind of which news sources do you trust truly the most when, making your assessment on the sport and kind of the moves that are happening within it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if you zoom out, if you look at media in general, especially sports media, it's become very clickbaity. It's kind of, we'd rather be first and wrong than last and right. And you see that infected in like all of sports media. And there used to be a time where like you could go on like a Formula One blog and it was well written, and now it's like you see articles about Charles Leclerc's dog might be being abused or something because he's getting taken to loads of races. And I think this is where we've seen the rise of the brand come up, where it's like, all this stuff is just clickbaity and stuff like that. I'd rather follow a driver on Instagram, and when they say something, when they're talking about something, I'll listen to them. So, in terms of F1 news, I usually just go on like Reddit and see what people have posted from Twitter and aggregate sources. But I think like everything, you just have to take it with a pinch of salt. There's people saying like, oh, Adrian Newey's buying a house in Oxfordshire, or Adrian Newey was last seen in Maranello. And I think like any one of us could literally just start a Twitter account and just random things like allegedly, or a source has told us, and things like that. And now you seem to be credited on like breaking news quickly and things like that. So I guess it's just take everything with a pinch of salt. And news cycles just move so fast. So like, once Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari's done, like Adrian Newey is leaving Red Bull, it's just the next one. It's just the next one. It's like, what's the next story? And I just look at it that way.
So what you're telling me, Ash, is you're confirming that you're not the Twitter account. Where is Adrian Newey? Question mark. I'm trying to figure out if he's at. I'm trying to figure out if he's at Maranello right now. That's why.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you should be like one of those. What's his Twitter accounts that follow like private jets?
Do you guys do any fan meetups? Have you done any obviously gone to races? How many races have you been to?
This is a great question. We haven't done any fan meetups yet. I guess we've got a load of people from around the world, and it's not something that's really crossed our mind just yet. We're just more focusing on the content, but we've met a load of great people like yourselves, F1 Coffee Corner with Terry, the women at I Give F1. So we've built a great people who to speak to about Formula One. I think Jacob got paddock passes to Silverstone last year, so he did an episode. Yeah, he did an episode about talking about that. He's on his way to Hungary, so I'm sure we'll do an episode around that. And we're both going to Bahrain next year, so we'll try and do an episode from Bahrain and stuff like that. Yeah, there's we're still kind of new into it. It's been just over a year, and we're still exploring lots of options, what we can do. One of the difficult things is Jacob lives in Denmark and I live in the UK, so sometimes it can be hard to meet up, but we definitely want to try some cool stuff. And obviously we want to come to Canada and meet you guys and just see a race together.
Yeah, we're already going again next year, and if you have tickets in the hairpin, we would love to show you around. Some really good restaurants in Montreal. It's always a lot of fun. I guess so. You haven't had your "oh my god, I've made it" moment?
Well, we've obviously had a few stuff of our posts go viral. We've met some really cool people, who work at Alpine.
Nice.
And we've met Ollie Caldwell, who's he's an F2 driver, Formula form testing as well for Alpine. So that's been like really cool to be exposed to those people. But I think like one of our personal things is I think Red Bull Racing liked one of our TikToks. And like, that feels good. But I think for us, me and Jacob have always said like, growth is nice and sharing our content and message with as many people as we can is great, but it's never been the driving force to why we do it. We do it because we love it. And if we had 0 followers for a year, we'd still jump on, do the podcast and stuff like that. And we're trying to avoid, being clickbaity, being like, unfortunately, that's what the algorithm favors, but we're trying to avoid that as much as possible. But we're trying to have fun episodes as well.
Yeah, we do it like a Formies, and that's like a really success. It's like our version of the Oscars, like but the Office edition.
Yeah, we did some awards as well, and yeah, we're like, should we just get something printed off and ship it to the factories? I was like, give it to me. I can just drive up to Milton Keynes and Oxford, and I'll drop it at the door.
That's exciting. So, what's the best way for people to come to find your podcast then?
Yeah, we're available on all popular podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple. It's simply just the 107 Pod. That's our socials as well. So we post memes, we post little behind the scenes stuff. Jacob's a photographer, so you'll see some cool photos as well. But yeah, that's where you can find us. We usually do race reviews, race previews. We have an F1 Academy podcast with Kareen on the Grid. So if you want to follow that, we talk everything F1 Academy. But yeah, that's where you can find us. And yeah, always happy to have feedback.
That's awesome. And for those that are listening, we're going to make sure that the 107 podcast is in all of our comment sections, on our Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Spotify. Let's kind of jump into Hungary. We did have a week off. There was a lot of news kind of going into this week. So I guess I know Jacob is on his way to the track. What are you kind of looking for this week in particular? We've seen some good racing in Hungary. We've seen some famous battles, some first wins, and someone reminded me Valtteri Bottas taking out half the grid in 2021. I guess the question is Mercedes back?
I think they're getting there. I wouldn't say they're back just yet, because I think we'll need to see what McLaren did with their consistent performances. What I would like to see is from two teams, is from Oscar and McLaren to have a good race and good strategy, and to see if Ferrari, because they won Monaco, they were quite strong there. Hungary is a very similar track. Let's see where the car really is, because if it doesn't perform at Hungary, I think they're in a lot of trouble. Because if you had a car that performs well at Monaco and then not at Hungary, what's happened, I think. But I'm expecting to see Max, the McLarens, and Mercedes fight it out for pole.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of going with how we've seen the last couple of weeks, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, we've talked about this in the previous episode that I don't know if Leclerc sold his soul to the devil just to win his home track. I think both drivers in Ferrari are trying to figure out what is going on with their car. Is it strategy? Is it just tire management? Like, they kind of want to get back to thing, especially now that McLaren has closed the gap so significantly in the constructors. It's that missing ingredients. Like, what is going on with McLaren? It's like, they've won. They just need that extra one more thing just to kind of go their way in order to continue to wins, or potentially Oscar to finally win his first race.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it seems to be that one extra thing seems to be the strategy, the need to nail that down. I think, they've been in positions in the past where they've not started with the fastest car or having a dominant car. So they're kind of like having to work out different ways and how to win the race. Now they're getting to that position of having a strong car. They need to have a strong strategy to match, whether it's overruling drivers or whatever it is. That just seems to be the missing piece. And obviously we come as like armchair strategists. It's a lot different, when they're there and like, Lando's saying this and Oscar's saying this, and, you've got a race going on, you've got to make split-second decisions. But I think if they nail that, bit of an out there prediction, I think we could see them win the constructors. I think the drivers are still Mac. I think we'll see them win the constructors.
It's really interesting, this whole kind of conversation that we have. We've not mentioned Sergio Perez once.
Yeah, I think that gives you an idea of like his performance. And I mean, he just signed the contract and they're already talking about exit clauses a couple of races later. Like, I mean, it'd be interesting to hear from Mike. What do you think has gone wrong there? Like, I know Max is a phenom, but he's been out qualified by Logan Sargent. He's making mistakes that I don't think he should be making.
Well, I think the stats talk about itself. Over the past 6 races, including a sprint in Austria, Perez has scored a total of 15 points, and Verstappen picked up 119 across the same period, which is basically keeping like Red Bull atop of the constructors. And I think dynamics in the garage, or if just he's like, we've also seen consistently, he's just not been doing very well qualifying. And like he has proven that he's come back from back in the grid on some occasions, not every time. But like you don't want that to always be a reoccurring thing. It's like, oh, okay, if I get knocked out in Q3, and then I'm thinking that I'm gonna win the race, like you don't want, you kind of want to be like 1-2. I don't know if Verstappen takes him out to dinner or something and says like, listen, you're my teammate. I really need you to win. I need you to be my P2 right now, and I need you to protect me from all these other drivers, because if Perez is not there, like there are moments where Verstappen is vulnerable. This weekend, like we could see that.
And you mentioned the race where Bottas took out half the grid, right? But if you look at how did Esteban Ocon get his first win? Fernando Alonso was defending like hell. So if you got Max against two McLarens, two Mercedes, and even at a point two Ferraris, he's going to need that rear gunner, and he doesn't have that. Yeah, I agree with you. It'd be interesting to know what's going through Max's head.
I don't know what the weather's looking like this weekend, because that could always just play a factor. But any other teams that you're kind of keeping your eyes on? I am curious now if Haas is going to continue that momentum. They're having a really good season this year. I know Williams, I think Albon was in the points last in Silverstone, so it's just curious to see if he can respond. But I'm also kind of wondering if Sauber or something, if they're gonna finally get on the board this year.
I definitely will be looking forward to see what Haas do, especially that Nico Hulkenberg. They brought some updates to the car. He's performing well. So it'll be interesting to see what he does there. I'd also really interested to see what happens with Alpine as well, because they made that huge jump, and Aston Martin as well, because they went downhill, and it's really frustrating being an Aston Martin fan, and they've kind of brought it back a little bit at Silverstone, and maybe they could do a little bit better at Hungary. But the question to you is, like, you're looking at these teams, you're Carlos Sainz, who do you go to? Because, you know, Haas could, we'll just put it out there, could go to Haas, could go to Alpine, could go to Williams, could even go back to Red Bull. Like you know, you're seeing Aston Martin go backwards, and some of these teams make jumps. Who do you go to as Carlos Sainz?
Well, I think the problem is if he goes to Red Bull, there's some tension between him and Verstappen. I think the dads don't really like each other, so I think that's the reason why he left. You go to Alpine, you do have to battle Pierre Gasly. You guys were former teammates or were part of the Red Bull Academy, but then you have all these like, not just like internal politics, but then the external politics with all these superstars with heavy investments in a team. So it's just like, okay, you have that pressure of like a Mahomes or a Travis Kelce or an Alexander Arnold. They're like, hey, by the way, like, you know, we'll pull our money out at any time. And it's like, do you, especially with how the season's gone for them, and do you really want to go to a Haas? Like, we've talked about this. He has to make his decision, but like as the summer break comes closer, and now that spots are becoming more narrow, it's slim pickings. Like, does he even have a spot in Formula One next year? Does he like go to Indy for a year off or something, like, which is kind of for him will probably be like, I wish I didn't want to do this. And obviously he probably does not want to be a reserve driver. He's proven himself that he doesn't, he's driven like really well this year to not be a reserve driver. But like, do you really want to suffer that 1 year on a lower tier team if you're not going to do that well mentally?
Yeah, because he's been on a race winning team in Ferrari, and it's just like, does he want to go and do a project, you know, like Audi or Haas or Williams, or does he maybe bite the bullet and say, like, you know what, I'm happy to battle Max if it means I'm in a race winning car. So and even Mercedes, they have a spot, and you've seen what they're doing right now. So could he go to Mercedes? But then they're talking about you could go, but it's 1 year, and then we want Antonelli, and yeah, so it's amazing. He's got a lot of options, but also he hasn't got a lot of options, if that makes sense.
It's like you have the 20 best drivers on the grid, but like it's, if the minute one position goes, then it's like a domino effect. So, I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting kind of storylines going into this weekend. And I think now that, you know, with Mercedes winning yet another race, and especially Lewis Hamilton, there's a lot to play for in Hungary. Do you have any predictions we usually like to do a podium prediction. Who do you think is going to be on yours?
I think I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton again. He
Okay.
does well at Hungary, and he's got really good confidence. The car's there, and he put it on pole there before when Red Bull was dominating. I'm going to go Oscar Piastri second, and I think I'm going to go Charles Leclerc third. I think he's due a good race. So, bit of an out there prediction.
I am gonna go I'm gonna go Verstappen, I'm gonna go Oscar Piastri because I feel like he's driving really well. And man, this is a toss up, but like I do like, maybe Carlos Sainz comes out of nowhere and just zooms past the team while there's some carnage going on. So I'll see what Andrew and Erica say for theirs. But Ash, we really appreciate you like coming on our podcast today and just being part of like our community over here. It's been real pleasure. And I mean, listen, Jacob's going to have a lot of fun in Hungary, and I can't wait to hear your guys' predictions, your post race episode. So make sure to follow Ash and the team at the 107 podcast. I will post their links. For those not following, we are on Linktree, and we'll have all of our social media channels there. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of the F1 podcast. Ash, thanks again. Andrew and Erica send their regrets as they had to leave mid-episode, but we'll see you at our next week's episode where we'll cover the Hungarian Grand Prix. Thanks so much, everyone.